Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the William Bonney podcast. Today, as you've seen from the title, I thought I would do a video about the sad passing of celebrity gangster Mr. Dave Courtney, OBE. um, yeah, quite a polarizing character, and there's a couple of things I want to talk about straight away. So you don't have to do too much research online, or you don't have to look at too much before you start seeing things like, was Dave Courtney for real? Was some of his stories made up? Was some of his persona made up? And secondly, was he a grass? So I thought I'd address those 2 points while we're talking about him today. It's not going to be a timeline of his life like I've done with other criminals. He does have a bit of a link to me and this podcast and just why I'm out in general. So I thought I would just have a quick look through. All right, so Dave John Courtney, born 17th of February 1959. He was an English self-proclaimed gangster who became both an author and an actor. He has been accused of embellishing and fabricating his criminal record and position in the underworld. However, Courtney has denied overstating his past. Courtney was born in Bermondsey, London. He went to Adamsville Primary School, South East London. Courtney often focused on his links with gangsters such as Reggie Cray, Lenny McLean, although he was only 9 years old when Cray was imprisoned. Courtney has claimed to have been shot, stabbed, and had his nose bitten off. He stated that he has had to kill to stay alive. He made a claim that his involvement in a car crash on the M20 was an attempt by someone who had a grudge against him, trying to kill him. Dave Courtney has often referred to himself as Dave Courtney OBE, the suffix standing for one big ego. His house in Plumstead, called Camelot Castle, was decorated with Union flags and a cross of St. George, and also a painted depiction of himself as a knight and a large knuckle duster. Courtney claims to have been involved in debt collecting and mining clubs, assault, contraband, and murder. He also claimed he has spent time in Belmarsh Prison as a high-security prisoner, which has actually been backed up by an ex-prison guard, Jim Dawkins, in his book The Loose Screw. He claims to have been found not guilty 19 separate trials, and on October 22nd, he was found dead after shooting himself. At first I heard it was mental health, and then afterwards I've heard that he was ill and he didn't want to be a burden. Essentially, he hated being old. He didn't like being in his 60s. And from what I know about the geezer, I think that if he wasn't a criminal, he would be the life and soul of the party. He'd be that guy in the pub always telling stories and making people laugh, and he would just be that lovable old lovable old bloke in the pub who didn't take too seriously and always just try to make people laugh. Now, like I say, you're going to hear a couple of things about Dave Courtney, is that he's made it all up and that he's a grass. And I just wanted to kind of talk about a couple of those things today, really. So, did he make it all up? Dave Courtney was, when he started out, he was a bouncer and a doorman in the 80s and 90s. In that kind of period, the 80s and 90s, the doormen were the criminals. They were the ones supplying drugs to the clubs. They were the one running the drugs around the area. And they would be the ones enforcing all the fights and the areas and the turf wars and all that kind of stuff. So Dave Courtney, he rose not to only be a doorman, but he ran a firm of doormen, which at its peak would have had over 1,000 doormen working for him. And if you remember, like I say, these doormen aren't just knuckleheads. They are crooks, criminals, gangsters, and drug suppliers. And they've got to be hard because they're running the door. He was a debt collector as well, did a bit of debt collecting. The story, Vinnie Jones in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, that character is Dave Courtney. He inspired that character, and Dave Courtney went along for the filming and helped him. The scene where he's smashing the guy's head in the door, and when he hits him with the, he's got the guy in the sunbed and he's smashing all that down. That actually happened. That was real life stuff, and they just used it as part of the story in the film. Whether it happened or not, who actually knows? Dave Courtney will obviously take these things to his grave, but he was well known. He wasn't just some gobby little prick who just made it all up. Because he was a doorman and because he was running all the doors and the clubs and things in the southeast of England, he then was asked in 1995 to do the security for Ronnie Cray's funeral. Now, obviously, Ronnie Cray was a huge gangster, very well known, probably known worldwide for his exploits. Very nasty man. So for Dave Courtney and his firm to be running the security was a big event. And that's when he got pushed into the public eye. Obviously, it was a great honour for him and his boys, but that's when he got pushed into the public eye, and the papers and everybody else started to know who Dave Courtney was. When I was in prison in 2000, I was reading loads. I was reading as many books as I could get my hands on, three books a week at one point. I moved away from fiction quite quickly, and I started to read autobiographies and true crime books and things like this. And obviously, I went through all the gangster books, all the famous faces and stuff. And I happened upon Dave Courtney towards the end of it, and he'd just written this book, "Stop the Ride, I Want to Get Off," and it basically outlines his life up to the 2000s. So if you want to read that, have a look, audio book it, whatever, and it will give you the kind of true taste of what this geezer's about. All right. Who knows if it's true? I have been in plenty of positions myself when I've done things, and I'm a small time criminal compared to what the Crays and obviously Dave Courtney and everything was into. But I've had stories embellished about me. I could give someone a slap on a Friday night because he owed me money, and by the time it's worked its way around the town and come back to me on Sunday night, I've basically put this guy's head in an oven, I've chased him round, I've done this, I've done that, and it's all just fabrication. Everyone who tells the story adds a little bit in to make it a bit juicier, and then it just keeps travelling, and that's just me on a very small scale level. Imagine being a nationwide known gangster. You can have people in pubs all over the country saying that they've done bits for you, So yeah, it's difficult to kind of know what's true and what's not. And even Dave Courtney himself has said that, with all these thousands of people, sometimes he said he's responsible for things that they've done, because he was running the clubs and bars, he was sometimes responsible for some of the activities that they got up to. So it is muddy waters, but like I say, he is who he is. After he got blown up and he was not blown up, but after he kind of blew up in the press and people started to get to know who he was, he made the transition from actual gangster to celebrity gangster. And by that I mean writing books and appearing in low budget films, that sort of thing. I'm sure he's had interviews in lads magazines and podcasts and all sorts for a while. And that essentially is how I obviously started doing this podcast, because Matt Price, who was the ghostwriter for Dave Courtney, approached me and said that he wanted to talk to me about my life after crime. So again, I promote this all the time, but Matt Price, Conversations with Criminals, he's done loads of interviews with Dave Courtney. He spent weeks with him. He's a friend of his, essentially. They were trying to write another book, but it was they've written everything that could be told about the guy, and Dave Courtney wanted something like 5 or 6 laughs per page, and in a 500-page book, that's a lot of laughs, and they couldn't quite get it together to finish off the book. But yeah, so yeah, Matt Price, Conversations with Criminals. Dave Courtney is kind of the reason I'm doing this. The second thing I wanted to talk about was a bit of sort of Dave Courtney being a grass. Now, it's difficult to kind of talk about, because I don't know, but I can try and shed some light from my experience on why people think he might be a grass and some of the explanations behind why he might have done what he did. Okay, so it came out in one of his court cases that Dave Courtney was a registered police informant under the name of Tommy Mack. Okay, now there are lots of reasons why he may have been in there. Okay, so he may well have been a grass, he may well have been snitching on everyone, and we've all got it wrong, or I've got it wrong and everyone else has got it right. But also, you have to look at the fact he could have been playing the system. Okay, now, you don't get 19 not guilties without playing the system or being a grass. when I was up for my life sentence, I remembered some of the things that Dave Courtney said in his book, and he gets out of trials. He talks about in his Stop the Ride, I Want to Get Off. He does talk about how he got out of trials. So it's very worth reading. Essentially, what you need to do is you just need to give the jury and the judge a story that they can't disprove. Okay? Because if there's any other reason for why you were doing what you were doing, or why the evidence is what it is, if there's any other reason than you were committing a crime for that evidence, then they have to let you go. So when I was facing my life sentence, I kicked someone's door in, I chased them around with a hammer, and I left the building and punched a copper, and I still got a not guilty in trial. Now, a lot of people are going to turn around and go, oh, fucking grass. You know, how did you get caught? You know, they found the hammer. The police identified me. I was arrested, obviously, blah, blah, blah. And I even told them I was there. But I said to them I was there to scare him. I wasn't there to hit him. So they tried charging me with, what was it? GBH within... No, that was it. It was burglary with intent of GBH. Because if you kick the front door in, even if you don't walk away with the telly, they still call it burglary for some reason. So it's burglary with intent of GBH. Now, because I didn't steal anything, and because I didn't hit anyone, it's very difficult to prove that intent. Okay? So I just gave them a story, like Dave Courtney told me to. I gave them a story that they couldn't disprove. Okay? And one of the things that the judge will say before he sends the jury away to go and deliberate is that if Mr. Bonney was there for any other reason than to cause GBH, then you must find him not guilty. Okay? And I'd already given them this reason, so I basically went and said that, you know, the girl he was living with, the uncle didn't like that girl living there, and the uncle had sent me round to go and scare the people into getting the girl out of the house, essentially. I gave them that story, and the jury believed it, and, well, they couldn't disprove it, and I walked away. I got a not guilty. Now, obviously, I'm a nobody. I'm an absolute nobody. But if you'd seen Dave Courtney, for example, kicking someone's door off, chasing someone around with a hammer, and then getting a not guilty, suddenly he's a grass, you know? But it's just a matter of playing the system, okay? Another, for example, I don't think I've talked about this before, but hypothetically, shall we say, if the police arrested me and they found my thumbprints on a bag of drugs, like an ounce of cocaine or something, in another part of the county, the police would come and arrest me, and they'd say, Bonnie, we found your thumbprint on a bag of drugs that's obviously left for a courier, because we caught the courier looking for the bag of drugs, and you know, your thumbprint is on it. So a lot of people would think that they were banged to rights then, and they were in a lot of trouble. But hypothetically, what I could do is that I could say that I received a phone call from an old friend who was believing that he was being set up, and he'd found a parcel of drugs in his flat. He quickly came to me because he knows I've been in trouble in the past, and you know, hypothetically, I could have sat in the car, been handed the bag of drugs. My thumbprint would end up on that bag of drugs, and I could hand it back to him and tell him that, yes, that's cocaine, and you need to get rid of it as soon as possible. You are being stitched up. You know, if he went away and then just threw that bag of drugs into a hedge irresponsibly, then that's nothing to do with me. But it does explain why my thumbprint is on that bag, without without committing a crime. So there are ways around things. Again, you know, if Dave Courtney gets caught with his thumbprint on a bag of drugs and then gets a not guilty, he looks like a grass. You know, just because he's more prolific than I am, and he's had 19 of these charges thrown at him, and in 19 of them he's batted away. That's what a lot of people are saying that he's a grass for. But this guy is just, in my opinion, a very smart man who knows how to get himself out of trouble. Okay? You don't need to defend the case in front of you. You just need to give them a story as to a legal reason for why you were where you were. All right? So, in my experience, I would say that it's not as open and shut as Dave Courtney is a grass. Okay? It doesn't look good that when you're on the police informant register, I'll give you that. But he could have been playing the police against themselves. All right. I'll give you another story. There was a chap in Liverpool. He got caught bringing a massive amount of heroin in. Okay, he brought in 2 massive parcels of heroin worth millions. One got caught, one didn't. Okay. He got caught and arrested along with a bunch of other people, and he was looking at a long time in jail, about 20 years in prison. Okay. So rather than taking the money, the thousands and thousands and thousands he made from the parcel that did get through, and then just sitting back in prison, doing your 20 years and then getting out to a lot of money, what he decided to do was play the system against itself. All right. He took the money that he made from selling the heroin and he bought weapons. And he got those weapons and then he stashed them around Liverpool and in Ireland. He went to the police then and said, look, if we reduce this sentence on the heroin importation, I can tell you where there's loads of IRA stashes of weapons. All right. And the police obviously are more interested in IRA stuff than they are heroin. All right. So he made a deal, and one by one, he basically informed on his own sites where he had stashed all these guns and weapons and things. And it looked like the police had done successful raids against IRA safe houses. Not one person was arrested, but he did enough that the police and the judge believed that he was working with them as an informant to help get guns off the streets. Okay? He received about 5 or 6 years when he should have got 20, and obviously the problem with that is everyone now thinks you're a grass. But not one single person got arrested. Now, you can flip this around on Dave Courtney and say, was Dave Courtney playing the system? Was he a registered informant so that he could explain some things away when he needed to? His answer was that the police were working for him, that he had members of the police working for him, and it was just part of the cover that Dave Courtney was a grass, just to kind of explain their relationship with each other and things. But again, who knows? The police have come to me before. When I've been arrested and walked away from it, they've put me in the interview room and they've come in all nicey and said, oh, look, we know you're trying to get your life together and stuff now. Is there any information you could give us that might possibly help us, targeting criminals and things? And I was just told them to go away. Do you know what I mean? They try it with everyone. Little crooks like me, they try and get information out of. And obviously big gangsters like him, they try and get information out of. Now, if it looks like, so say for example Dave Courtney did something like that, so he may have put a load of weapons or drugs in a flat and then told the police where it was and said, got himself out of a charge because a kilo of coke's been found. Is that grassing if you bought the kilo of coke and put it in that flat? Is it grassing if it's one of your enemies and you stitch them up? You basically get a kilo of coke and put it in a nonce's fucking flat and he gets caught. Is that grassing? Who knows? Again, I don't know the circumstances. I'm just trying to say that there could be other reasons. There could just be other reasons that we don't know about. All right. But like I say, Dave Courtney isn't your typical gangster. He likes the attention. If people aren't saying Dave Courtney's name, then he doesn't exist. And he hates that. It's a bit like that other one, Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson is his own worst enemy, in the same way that Dave Courtney courting celebrity is his own worst enemy. It doesn't help you in the long run, but they want the fame, they like the buzz, they like the notoriety, they like everyone in the room knowing who they are. A lot of criminals would rather nobody knew who they were. And that's why you'll get that there's a spectrum of crime. Okay, I get people in my comments saying that I'm making it up, I've never been to prison, and all of it's garbage. And I'm only small time. So imagine since 95, having your face shoved everywhere in the newspapers and everything, and everyone knowing your business and writing books about how much of a bad man you are. It's gonna get some unwanted attention. All right, so it's not my typical podcast about profiling a criminal. There is plenty out there. I don't know if it's true. I can only go from his books. I know people who know him, and they've backed him. It's one of those. Make your own mind up. But let me just tell you, those muddy waters aren't as clear always as people try to make out. All right, like, subscribe. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you again soon.